All right, here we are. Welcome. Thanks for joining. We're doing another hot seat video installment with our mastermind group, the best mastermind group, as we just started calling it by default, I think. Here with Doug Stuart, the rest of the gang. Doug, excited to be learning more about you, your background, and your approaches. So I think we're going to have the first question for Doug from Jeff. Why don't you go ahead and hit Doug with a question so we can get to know him?
Sure. Doug, I think you've got your hands in a lot of buckets, and most of those buckets are jobs that probably didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. I know somewhere in the mid-90s, a lot of teachers and educators started telling their students, you know, you're probably going to have careers and jobs or job fields that don't exist yet. And I think you're really kind of a stereotypical guy for that. You've got a lot of things going on, and most of those things, you know, that would not have been open to the common folks a few years ago. How did you? What exactly are some of your businesses, and how you spend your time, and how did you get into those things? Again, because most of these did not exist 20 years ago. What brought you to where you're at, I guess, would be my question.
Yeah, thanks. I have found that you're right. Like 25 or so years ago, there weren't many of the things that I'm doing. I mean, there were, but they were very like, you really had to get lots and lots of training and really make it at a high level. Like when I went to college with Nathan, and we got communications degrees, and it kind of opened a world for me to do all kinds of different things. And one of the things that I have found for me is that I always like working with people to help them achieve a goal, have some sort of like aspirational, you know, some sort of achievement. And one of the ways that I did that for a number of years was through just training at a large retailer. I used to work for Apple, and I would do training with people. And it became clear to me that I really liked helping people like accomplish their business goals, or, you know, just even if it's just personal goals. And a lot of things, there was a variety of things like video production that they wanted to do, and I would always help them learn how to do that. And I had all these skills sort of just, you know, bubbling up in me. And, you know, on my spare time, and also in, you know, part of my career path there was to actually learn to teach all these things. So I found myself doing things like web design and video because I really liked to do them. And, you know, at some point you realize that your hobby can make you some money, and it started to for a little bit on the side. And then it's like, hey, let's go out on my own. So I do video production, web design, graphic design, kind of my hand is in a lot of buckets, as you sort of mentioned. What's unique about the kind of things that, you know, you say, you know, these jobs won't exist in 30 years or whatever, you know, back in the 90s. So if I did my math right there, right? So yeah, so we're on lockdown and stay-at-home orders, you know, while we're recording this, and my work has been somewhat affected, but not in a way that people who have to show up to, you know, an actual location to do work. Like a lot of my work is from home. And in the 90s, like that, very unheard of. Telecommuting was maybe for a handful of people, like literally a handful of people. And you know, when I got into I think what I would say here is that the barrier to entry to these kinds of jobs is much lower. And so people can do amazing work for far less capital investment, even educational investment. It's the kind of things that you can sort of self-teach yourself, and then you go to the experts to really hone your skills, and you do it through practice, through internships. And, you know, there's always going to be need for formal education to some extent. But I think the lower barrier to entry makes it possible. When I was in college, one of the things I wanted to do was go into film production at like go to LA and do that kind of stuff. And that never materialized for me, but I still get to do the similar enough things for my clients that I would have had to do a lot different kind of work if I had, you know, moved to LA and tried to make it there, you know, so.
Right. So barrier of entry, kind of learning your way as you go.
Oh, yeah.
Got you in the direction.
Yeah.
And I would agree with your statement about communications being, you know, broad to kind of get you into some different things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been an interesting process. Charisma, we were chatting a little bit earlier about some of the thoughts you had for Doug, and you've obviously been in a lot of different types of projects. Why don't you ask your question next? I think it's a great one.
Well, I have two questions for you, Doug. One of which is, as a local marketer, physicians and companies ask me, so why do I need the web design and how can I get started? What are the steps to get involved or to open one up?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, what is your least favorite and what is your most excited project that you've done? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, what do you do to get started and why does someone need a website? I think sometimes it is difficult to convince people they need a website because they see their customers as, oh, well, if they want to find me, they will, or they'll do a search on Google Maps for the local, and whatever, I can't think of a specialist right now. They're like their local specialist or chiropractor or whatever it might be. They might look them up and be like, oh, I'll just call them. Right. And everybody, I would say that maybe not everybody needs a website, but everybody needs web presence. And when you have a website, then you have control over you have a lot of control over what your web presence is. If you don't have a website, it's like, do you need one to do business and make money? Maybe not, but you're going to look like you're the kind of business and you're going to be the kind of business that has a presence everywhere. I live in Amish country, Pennsylvania, and there are Amish places that have websites because it suits them to have websites. And so if the Amish need a website, so do you. Because that's where the world
just sales pitch.
That's great.
In terms of like getting started and stuff, I mean, I think it is true that in some sense you can spend a very little amount of money and just have a website. But you want to also put yourself in the hands of somebody who knows how to get your presence on the web. This isn't about a website. This is about a web presence. This is about being visible. Right. Yeah, being visible, being front and center to who is looking for you, and even just getting your name in front of them. And it also is really, really important that you understand your messaging. There's so much out there. I mean, how many billboards, well, not now, but how many billboards do you drive by and you're just kind of like, yeah, not for me, not for me, not for me. Websites in a lot of ways are a lot like a billboard. And if people don't look at it and stay and you draw their attention, then it is worthless. You can have a nice looking website, but if it's not clear, and if you don't have the right messaging, then your website, whatever little amount of money you might have sprung for by, your first cousin's nephew, twice removed, who just said, hey, I'll do it for you for free. Okay, that's a good start. Everybody should get there somewhere. But messaging is really a clear thing. So your second question was least favorite. I would say, and most favorite. So
like a horror story project.
Yeah. So I would say that the ones that I don't look forward to are ones where there is no clear plan and the client doesn't quite have in mind what they're looking for. They might have an outcome. They might be like, other than make more money, right? Like everybody's like, oh, I want my website to drive more traffic or get more people in my store or whatever. I mean, most people have that. But when they have a business model or plan for their website that doesn't seem to make sense. And now, again, I'm not an expert in business management, so maybe it makes sense to them and I'm just the guy to design their site. But it's not really fun to design a site when you don't have, for me at least, when I don't have that sort of shared excitement for what is this going to do? And it has to have a purpose. And if they just want to put up a nice, the equivalent of a nice painting on the web, well, you could do that. We could hang it on a wall, but your website needs to have a function. And if it's not clear what that function is, and if you're not clear as a client on what that function is, your website's kind of a waste of time. And I don't like doing things that are a waste of time. Sure, I'll get paid. I'll do a great job for you. But I like to align with customers and website clients that we can say, hey, we know that here's the end result. You're going to make more money because you're going to get more customers and you're going to see more revenue. You're going to see more traffic, whatever your goals are there. And I know and feel confident that I can help you with that. So
That's
that would
great.
be like, those would be my least favorite, like the ones that like don't have that plan. I would also add that ones where like the goalposts keep moving and it's like, oh, well, we've changed our mind on this, we've changed our
Yeah.
mind on that, and now we want to go, and then it's just like, they call it scope creep, where it's like, you know, oh, now we want this, oh, now we want that, and
Right.
you know, that's happened few and far between for me because I'm pretty straightforward in my terms on things. But you know, it happens, and you know, you want to treat your customers well and do what they need, and you know, go outside the box to really make them the hero. So it's really not been a problem. But those are the ones that are kind of like, you know, you know, you're like, all right. You know, it's the ones that are, you know, you got to roll up your sleeves instead of being excited. Best projects. Well, I think in some ways I've already explained the best project. It's the one where I can sort of see the clear vision for a client, and I can see what they're going for and the vision that they have. And ones that I feel, I mean, this is probably true of any sort of freelancing. Anytime you feel a personal connection with the kind of thing that the customer is producing, which, you know, or selling, or the messaging, if it's a nonprofit, you know, if you're really into, you know, let's say orphan care, and you're asked to shoot a video or do a website for a nonprofit that helps orphans, well, clearly you're going to be excited about that kind of client. So I think ones that have a personal connection for me are the ones that I get most excited about. So yeah.
That's great. Well, thanks for answering my questions.
Yeah, definitely. And you
Yeah.
know, you mentioned a clear strategy a couple times, and so I'm thinking of
A purpose.
yeah, I'm thinking of you know, tossing it over to Paul for a little bit, because I know he always has questions about brand strategy, and from that perspective, how important is, you know, the strategy coming into a project would be something that I'd want to come back to. But Paul, and maybe right after Paul, we'll head down. I'm going around Brady Bunch style, the way I see it. But maybe right after Paul, maybe John, I know you got a few things for him too. So we'll keep going around the horn.
Yeah, actually, Doug, I had the pleasure of working with you on a few projects, and I really love how you have a lot of depth in your knowledge when it comes to design, video, and so forth. So looking at the brand and trying to keep everything, trying to keep the customer going down that path, how do you use those skills you have and the knowledge to really build a great website to accomplish those goals, when sometimes the client isn't even clear what some of these processes or videos, things can help them reach the goals? I mean, how do you kind of guide them when you do
Yeah.
your work?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've learned about myself, Lee would be happy to hear this because she's not on our call today, but she loves that when people know things about themselves and can put that forward, is that I am somewhat of a jack of all trades. And that doesn't mean I haven't mastered anything, but when you're a jack of all trades, you have your hands in a lot of things. And it means that when a customer comes to you and says, hey, what do you know about this? There's very few things that you can't answer, oh gosh, I don't know anything about like that, you know, right? So like if someone comes to me and says, well, what do you know about Facebook? Well, you know, John is on our call here. He is the guy I would go to for like, you know, strong social media work, right? Doesn't mean I can't do it, but I know something about it. I can kind of point the client in the right direction. When it comes to actual projects, I can sort of know what my limits are, know how to bring other people and bring other experts in so they can accomplish the kind of goals that they have. And what I think might be very important is I know, based on experience, based on, you know, lost money for me because I had to, you know, spend a lot of extra time and energy on a client because I didn't set the terms right, you know, years ago or something. I know what boundaries can be set and say, here are the parameters. And if you go down this direction, this is going to cost you a whole lot more. Here's why this path is going to be another thing. One thing that I'll reference my history at the previous employer was that I learned that when you tell somebody, I had to, because it was retail, I had to sort of balance the sales side of things with the support side of things. And when you tell somebody, you know, it's like, can your iPhone do this? Or can your Mac do this? Or can I get this done if I buy an iPad instead of a Mac or something like that? Yeah, you know, when you want to say, well, the answer is yes, but I know how to walk them through the right kind of questions and say, well, but can you really be happy and thrive in that experience? And the answer sometimes is still yes. And sometimes it's, oh, well, here are your trade-offs and here's the things you're going to have to deal with. And that may or may not be a problem for a particular customer or client. And so I have the ability to sort of be honest without being too technical be honest with the limitations they have on the goals that they're, or the platforms and tools they're using to accomplish their goals. So that would be, you know, one of the experiences. I mean, I know you and I, Paul, have talked about different methods and, you know, add-ons, plugins for websites. It's like, well, this will get the goal, but we'll run into this problem. And how would we, you know, how can we possibly get around that? Or maybe it's not a problem if we just investigated further for maybe a different platform.
Right. Good. Thanks.
Question. Okay, I'm muted. Here we go. Great question, Paul. John, over to you. Jump in, and then after maybe we'll hop across to Greg for the next one after John.
I feel like with Doug, he's very Carnegie-esque because when he's broadened his understanding of a lot of different topics and buckets, and when he's maybe not a master of a particular bucket, he is able to reference an area in a place where he can find that information. So I feel like his addition to my life and all of our lives is such where he adds a tremendous amount of value, but also has enough humility and wisdom to know when he needs to reach someplace else to find something instead of just saying, I think, or it's been my experience, caveat, sometimes people don't want to admit they don't know something, so they try to kind of BS their way through it.
They half-ass it.
They half-ass it. Doug's not going to be the person to do that. He'll, you know, politely tell you, hey, that's great. And here's where we can find that. So it's great. There's, you know, integrity and humility there to be able to know when you need to go search for something, or I positively know the answer to that. So one or the other. So Doug doesn't half-ass things. I really appreciate that.
For sure.
Then my question for Doug would be, what would you recommend to somebody now, college students? I work with a lot of people just starting off in life who are interested in computers and what you do. It's different now. You're further down along the path, and technology is, you know, doubling every 6 months. We're moving at a much more rapid pace. What's the difference now in your field of work than it was, say, when you first started? And how has you been able to catch up to that curve and get ahead of it? And how do we all benefit from how things are changing so rapidly? Are we under the wave? Are we riding it? You know, what does one do next in this, you know, technology curve?
Yeah, I mean, your question in some ways, you kind of echoes a little bit of what Jeff was getting at. It's like thinking about what would you advise your younger self in a way, and like how would you prepare people, you know, when you got started. Now, I've been doing, you know, the kind of work that I've been doing for about a decade, you know, as just freelance or hobby or whatever, and it's been more of a career for a few years now. What would I say to younger people getting into this? The changes that are happening, I think. Growing up in the 90s was rapid enough change, but it didn't happen because the internet has sort of accelerated the way that change happens, and it happens really rapidly. I mean, there's new platforms out. I mean, there's probably been 20 new platforms introduced while we've been on this call, right? And they all, like, half of them do the same amount of stuff, and they have all this overlap. And so, like, there's always this learning curve. So the first thing is your learning curve will never end. Okay. Even after you retire, which is forever, you know, in the future for you, your learning curve will never end. But there are some skills that you can develop to become the kind of person that can kind of handle all of those, you know, curveballs that things throw you. So, you know, life will throw you all kinds of things, but some things are not going to ever change. You are going to deal with clients. Okay. You're going to have to deal with people. So become a people person. It doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert. I am not an extrovert. And it just means that you have to be personable. And sometimes that just takes a lot of practice. Sometimes it takes a little bit of, like, you know, just reading, you know, like you mentioned a different Carnegie, but like reading Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, something like that. You know, you're going to have to deal with people. Become a people person in the way that is genuine to who you are. Okay. So you always have to be able to do that. Know how to tell a story And I don't mean to like tell a story to like get people to like or anything like that. What I mean is how do you communicate in ways that get people hooked into what you're saying? And if you can do that, you can sell. And I don't mean that in a sort of schmoozy way, but like you can sell anything for a client, and they can feel confident in your sort of ability to tell the narrative of why they're the right guide for their, you know, for their customer or their client or whatever it might be. So people skills, learn how to tell a story, always be learning new things. I think it's pretty, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's pretty well established now that learning just one thing for the rest of your life is only going to work in certain fields. And, you know, I would say even, Charisma, you can probably speak to this. Maybe I'll ask you this in a future hot seat. When you're in the hot seat, it's like even doctors have to keep learning. And like, you know, being let's say a foot doctor is, you know, going to be roughly the same for the next couple decades, but there's still more to learn within that, right? When it goes to digital stuff or anything, you know, it changes very rapidly. There are things I wish I had learned years ago when I probably had the opportunity to do it, but I didn't because I was learning other things, and you know, maybe I could maybe chalk a few of it up to you know, I just wasn't interested. But you know, always be willing to learn new skills. Always be willing to prove that old maxim about, you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Always be willing to learn the new tricks.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. And we got time for a couple more. I was going to ask, I mean, we got one.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, that was a great
No,
answer, Doug.
You know, honestly, I was like, God, I hope this is all being recorded.
Yeah, it's real good.
Good.
So I was going to ask maybe Greg to jump in next, and then Jeremy, who's not on video but's on audio. Jeremy, if you wanted to jump in and hit Doug with anything, we got, you know, time for a few more before we wrap up. So either you guys want to jump in with a question for Doug, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask a question. Thanks, Doug, for taking my question. So let's say that I'm a potential client of yours. What are some of the things that you would want me to know to be a better client and work better with you? Like, are there certain things that you would want me to know? This is easier for you, this is harder for you. What are some of those things that you would want me to know to be a better client and make our relationship run more smoothly?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is being open and willing to just ask questions. I've dealt with a lot of clients where they feel a little embarrassed or intimidated asking a question because they don't want to feel stupid or whatever. And, you know, even the smartest person knows you don't make anybody feel stupid if you want to do work with them. But, you know, all kinds of questions are, you know, are fair game, right? So be open. If you have a question, reach out. If you think it's your fault or if you think it's whatever, it doesn't matter. Just like reach out and, you know, we'll kind of accomplish it. So the other is deadlines are up to you. With you, the client, you know, I like to set deadlines for clients because it keeps them moving along, but they are the driver. Now, obviously there's, you know, things like contracts, which is like, hey, look, if you're going to take 6 months on something we promised would be done in 3 weeks, then there might be some, you know, issues there. But typically the people that I work with, they're like, hey, you know, I'm the one holding back the deadline, is, you know, I hope that's okay with you. They're coming to me saying that. And so I work very hard to hit those deadlines. It might be because I have sort of a procrastinator's tendency where it's like, if I don't have a deadline anytime soon, it just kind of sits there. Maybe that's a personal thing that I'm working on. But when I have deadlines, like I pretty much get them done. So, you know, so that would be the one thing. Open communication. Don't hesitate to reach out. You know, let's see. Yeah, those would be the first two things that come to mind. I'm sure I'll think of more as soon as we're done this call, and you know, I could maybe do an addendum or something. But yeah,
for sure. We'll have to do a part 2 on that one. But that was a great question, Doug, Greg. You know, what are things you can do to be a better client? You know, that's at least half the battle, right? For those of us in the you know, doing consulting or service businesses. So that's a great thing to chew on, and we'll hear more about that from Doug. Yeah, Doug, you're great with deadlines. I do have to jump in on that one. You're great with deadlines from what I've seen working with you the last year. You keep driving things forward and are consistent also with expectation management. I'd say one of your best things has been, from where I sit, expectation management. You know, when I see you interact with some of our other partners or mutual clients, things like that, you know, how you come in with that customer service approach. And it's not just about yes or, you know, agreeing to things. It's about managing those expectations as you go each step. And living in the real world. You know, things change, and people's perspectives on projects change, their moods change. I've seen you grapple with those things very well. I think that's one of your strong skills. So, Jeremy, did you want to jump in and ask Doug something before we start to wrap up? Jeremy is our illustrious search engine search expert, and I think a lot of great overlap there, but would love to open that up. Or if anyone else has anything you want to jump in kind of to summarize or put in a good parting thought for Doug, or some word of encouragement, anything like that, open it up. All right. Well, I see everybody's muted, so that means no one's jumping in. So I'll take that as a good sign.
Well, I'm really glad that I've answered every question that you can think of.
You've done a great job.
20 to 30 minutes. So I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. I've worked with each of you to one extent or another, and it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, Doug.
I have a question, comment, or something.
Sure.
I just wanted to bring up real quick, Doug. I don't think anybody's asked, or you haven't mentioned the fact that you've got a podcast.
Yeah.
Well, then you've gone more than
talk
7
about the
episodes,
podcast.
and I think that, you know, I hope to have one someday. But I think that's a cool aspect that kind of brings things full circle. You know, you're really kind of a renaissance man as far as the new technology, and again, you got your hands in a lot of buckets. But I think the podcast is really cool, and I think it for me at least, listening to you, even the last half hour, it kind of brings everything like full circle, knowing that you're doing something like that as well. Could you just, you know, whatever thoughts come to mind, speak to that for a minute or two, your thoughts on your podcast, where you're at with it, what you would want someone to know about your podcast?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do on the side is I run a nonprofit that is it deals with politics and Christian faith. And so I run a podcast that deals with and has interviews with a bunch of people who have interesting and unique takes in their field on issues that are there to sort of inform people. And so the name of the organization is the Libertarian Christian Institute. And that's a very niche sort of crowd. And so there's a lot to kind of, you know, unpack there, but basically we want to promote human flourishing. And so that's one of the things that is sort of a passion of mine, is how do you promote human flourishing through establishing, you know, a framework and making a case for individual liberty. So I don't intend for this conversation to get like controversial on any topics at all, but my experience as a podcaster has been to people who, like, I interview a lot of different people from a lot of different perspectives, and sometimes I just simply don't agree with them. Okay. And it's been a really good challenge to have conversations with other people whom, you know, I mostly agree with them, but there's a lot of places where I don't agree. And so we have that sort of, you know, we have to sometimes, you know, manage that difficult terrain, or we kind of, you know, talk about it in, you know, somewhat humorous ways even. And so doing a podcast, interviewing people, being on a schedule, I mean, we've done this for 2.5 years now, and it's been a weekly podcast, which is, you know, I look back at it and I think, wow, that's a lot. Other people look at it and they're like, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, we're just doing it. And so what is interesting about this, I'm just connecting it to the other questions, is that I have learned that a lot of businesses are thinking about doing podcasts or using podcasts in certain ways to build their audiences, you know, if they're marketers and so forth. And so podcasts can be a really, really good way. If your audience is the kind of people who listen to stuff, then they very well may listen to your podcast. And it doesn't have to be audio only. It could do video, like something like what we're doing, where there's 2 people talking or 3 people talking. Those are becoming very, very popular. People put them on while they're at work. They may or may not watch the podcast, but they listen, and they're very likely to reach people when they're in a number of ways. So that whole web presence that I talked about earlier, podcasting is one of those. YouTube is, I think, like the second search engine, right? Like, if you have video on your site, if you have video that you do like regular content, you are going to show up better in search engine results. Jeremy can back me up on that. And so it's just simply a matter of how we are, because people like to watch videos. I guess you get a bonus if you put a cat in your video or something. I don't know. I've never done that. I've never tried
your
that.
Cat? Who was supposed to
I
bring
don't.
the cat today?
My cat's off screen. It wouldn't have surprised me if the cat, walked across.
That would have been too perfect.
Oh man, that would have been too perfect. But yeah, no, my experience in podcasting for a nonprofit, because it's for a cause, it's also been a unique experience to promote something that is idea based, and gets people thinking about things in a certain way, rather than buying something or selling something and that kind of thing. But I've actually had clients where I produce their podcast, and they use it to reach a greater audience.
Yeah, I've listened to your podcast a few times, and I find it very intriguing. So I've enjoyed it personally.
Oh, good.
We'll make sure when we share this on our different channels, make sure we throw a link around for a few of your things, Doug. You multi-talented
Absolutely.
web designer, podcaster, marketer, free thinker, Doug Stuart. It's been great having you, on the team, being on the team with you the last year or so, and just it's been great building this group together. So we all appreciate you, Doug. Thanks for everything you do for our group, and thanks for your inspiration. And
cool.
we'll have to do a part 2 real soon.
All right.
So
Thanks,
we'll wrap
Doug.
up with that. Thanks,
That'd be great.
everybody.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.